generations of readers. Then, at university, when I reread Wordsworth's poems in chronological order, I began to see that the tangled history of his relationship with Coleridge might provide a large part of the answer to my question of how someone who was so good could be so bad. During the 1980s, I wrote a doctoral thesis about Wordsworth and Coleridge and their successors, Keats and Hazlitt, as readers of Shakespeare. I also had the good fortune to be a tutor on the Wordsworth Summer Conference, the brainchild of Richard Wordsworth, an actor best known for his role in the cult 1950s science fiction horror film The Quatermass Experiment. He was the poet's great-great-grandson. This was a conference unlike any other. It lasted for 2 weeks, and while the mornings and early evenings were devoted to suitably academic lectures, seminars, and learned papers, the afternoons were spent hiking the fells. As a tutor, one had to be as adept with a compass and an ordnance survey map as with an edition of Wordsworth and the latest literary theoretical jargon. Every morning at 7:30, there was a brisk 3-mile walk around Grasmere Lake, led by Richard, as fleet of foot in his 70s as my father had been in his 60s, and as Wordsworth himself must have been when he ascended Helvellyn at the age of 70. I had one frustration as a tutor then, and I still have it today: the desire to give to students, and indeed to anybody who raises an eyebrow when the poet's name is mentioned and the only word that comes to mind is daffodils, a not overlong and not over-specialized book that would make them excited about Wordsworth. He has always lacked the glamour of Coleridge, De Quincey, and Byron. He was neither opium addict nor mad, bad, and dangerous to know. He lacked, too, the pathos of Keats, Shelley, and John Clare. He failed to make the romantic career move of dying young or going mad. If you try to read a comprehensive account of his entire 80 years, the chances are that you will lose the will to live somewhere around the halfway mark. 2 of the more recent biographies of him, published in 1998 and 2000, are each 1,000 pages long, and one of them covers only the first half of his life. For all their scholarship and their sympathy, they reproduce one of Wordsworth's faults, namely the prolixity that was mocked by Lord Byron. And Wordsworth, in a rather long excursion, I think the quarto holds 500 pages, has given a sample from the vasty version of his new system to perplex the sages. The book I wanted to share was one that was not 1,000 pages long and that explained several things at once without getting bogged down in too much detail. How the first half of Wordsworth's life was such an extraordinary adventure, and the second half so dull. Why the poetry of the first half is so memorable, that of the second so forgettable. Why William Hazlitt called his genius a pure emanation of the spirit of the age. Why he provoked both excoriation and adulation in the next generation. Why the Victorians had no hesitation in regarding him as the only modern poet to stand in the company of Shakespeare and Milton. A book, above all, about how Wordsworth made a difference. After all these years, I have still not found a book that not only outlines the story of the man and examines the best of his work, but also places him in the context of his revolutionary age and traces the vicissitudes of his reputation. So, I have attempted it myself, in the belief that a selective account of the journey from the visions and experiences that made him a poet to the rays of influence that made him a force in cultural history will reveal why his words are still worth reading 2.5 centuries after his birth. The role of literary, as opposed to historical biography, should be to discern and seek to explain the distinctive qualities of the subject's imaginative power. Why else should one bother to write or read the life of a poet? Wordsworth's best early readers, most notably Coleridge in his Biographia Literaria or My Literary Life and Opinions, and William Hazlitt in his essays, recognized this and accordingly mingled biographical recollection with literary critical analysis, supported by ample quotation. Some of Hazlitt's essays and reviews give more space to the words of his subject than to his own opinions. I have followed the example of these 2 in quoting amply from Wordsworth, not only because they wrote as eyewitnesses, but also because they are my touchstones of literary insight. I therefore have, to adopt a phrase that Wordsworth used in his preface to Lyrical Ballads, one request I must make of my reader. Sometimes, when we encounter blocks of indented quotation as we read a biography or historical